right, so I have a pretty cool opportunity to intern at a foster care agency this year, and I also work at the same agency in the adoption unit. So it's pretty cool that I have a lot of background in child welfare. Some things that I've learned since working in the agency and interning in the agency is that the child welfare industry works with every other community agency for the most part. They are involved really closely with working with the hospitals and AI DuPont in Delaware. They work closely with the state, they work closely with the disabilities office, they work closely with the schools and therapists, and a variety of other social services agencies that includes addiction support, and all of these other different agencies. Last year I was working in Delaware Hospice, working as or interning as in their grief support for children, and I even recognized that a lot of my child welfare training and background has come in really handy, even with working with children that are grieving the loss of a loved one. Even though when I went in, I kind of anticipated that it was going to be very different from working with kids in child welfare, and it was. But I had thought, that meant that parents were going to be actively engaged in their child and things like that. But what I've learned is that it is really important for all of us to have a pretty good understanding, to some degree, of child welfare, because no matter where we work as social workers, we are playing an important role of community eyes on vulnerable kids and vulnerable families. And it's important for us to have the knowledge and understanding to be able to pick up on any situations that might be either risky or vulnerable kids or families or anyone in sticky situations, to be able to help identify them and make the appropriate hotline calls or referrals to ensure that we're keeping all of the kids in our community safe. And for that reason, it's super important for all social workers, anyone really working with children and families, to have a pretty good understanding of child welfare so they can do their part to keep our kids and families safe in our state and in our communities. And so some of the top two biggest laws and legislation that I could think of was the Safe Families Act, which helped put a timeline on how long kids can be in care before they get to be adopted. So that has greatly impacted child welfare in the past 20 years. Also, in the past 5 years or so, there has been the Reasonable and Prudent Parent Standard, which is a national piece of legislation that has helped children in foster care receive the same amount of normalized childhood experiences as children not in foster care. It gives foster parents the ability to make everyday decisions for foster kids without having to involve workers and birth parents and things like that. So it's really empowering for kids and families. Recently, there is more of a push for the Families First Act that emphasizes preventative child welfare measures, so family intervention services, rather than children coming into foster care and treatment services. And so that has been kind of where a lot of the funding and things like that have gone for child welfare these days. So overall, child welfare is super important to learn about because it's going to be applicable in probably almost any social work job, and I'm super grateful that I have the opportunity to work and intern in a child welfare agency, and I've learned a lot, and I think it's going to make me a very well-rounded social worker one day, because it has such a diverse background. So